Hey everyone, welcome to Decision Desk HQ's show of Let Me Finish. I'm joined here with Catherine Swartz, a reporter at Notice, and I am Liberty Vittert, professor of the practice of data science at Washington University in St. Louis. So today we are coming at you with the newest polling, which I will say is kind of the oldest polling because it hasn't changed that much. And then we'll go into the stories of the day. So let's get into the polls. So our newest polling shows the national at Harris edging out Trump at 50.1 versus Trump's 46.5. And then if we move into the swing states or battleground states that we're going to be seeing here in this election, we have Trump leading in 3 of them. He's leading in Arizona at 48.9 to Harris's 47.7. He's leading in Georgia by just 0.7 at 48.3, and he's leading in North Carolina at 49.2 to Harris's 48.5. And then if we look at the 4 swing states that Harris is leading in, she's leading in Michigan at 48.3 to Trump's 48.1, so not by much. She's leading in Pennsylvania at 48.9 to Trump's 48.1. Wisconsin at 49.4 to Trump's 48.1. And finally, the biggest in Nevada at 48.9 to Trump's 46.9. But I guess, Catherine, that brings us to this question. The polls really haven't changed at all. And everyone's kind of wondering why. And one of the arguments is because there really haven't been that many polls. And I guess a lot of people are saying it's because of money. You know, polls have gotten really, really expensive to run. So no one's running them. Why are they taking a break now? Or do you think that's why we're not seeing a change in the polling?
Well, it's true. Polling's very expensive, and polls for months have shown consistently what we know, that this is coming down to a key number of battleground states, and these results are largely within the margin of error. So it's not that we're not going to see any more polls in the future, but given 30 days out, it really is just this question of, we know the states that are the battlegrounds that will decide this election. We know that Harris and Trump are spending all of their time in these states. All the money is going towards those states. So, you know, from the perspective of me as a reporter, there's only so much at this point that the polls can show that they haven't already shown, which is that this is going to be an extremely close race in those states.
I mean, I think you could argue that this will be the closest race in this century. I mean, maybe 2000 with Gore and Bush, but I mean, this is a coin flip. This is a true 50-50 toss-up that we're seeing. And I'm not sure the polls are going to show us all that much, but you never know. We could have some big October surprise. I mean, what are you seeing happening right now? Are you seeing a push for the undecided voters, or are you seeing a real push for getting out the vote?
Yeah, well, the undecided voters in these states is a very small percentage of voters. Like we've talked about, you know, on the show before. And like I've said, you know, in Pennsylvania, given the poll, it's about 3% of voters that are still true undecided. So, you know, part of it from the Harris campaign particularly is a swing for these independent voters, these moderate voters, and appealing to them. But for the Trump campaign, what I have been reporting on is that it's much more focused now on a get out the vote effort targeted towards low propensity voters. So those are voters that haven't voted, you know, in 2016 or 2020, or that tend to not vote in off years, or new voters altogether. There's been some criticism of this approach of only focusing on new voters. It's rather non-traditional. As a presidential strategy, you want to focus on the people that are voting regularly. And the criticism is that the Trump campaign strategy is really born out of necessity because he is doing so little to target more moderate voters, that he's got to reach out to new voters. But as my colleague Alex Rorty and I got into this week at Notice, there is actually a lot of sophistication to this strategy that even Democratic strategists are saying there is something here of the mail approach, the digital approach, and the non-traditional media approach of Trump going on podcasts like Theo Vaughn, that they're targeting largely millennial young men, particularly Black and Latino young men as well, with the message really focused on the economy, on gas prices, and on getting people registered to vote that haven't registered before. So what's really left to be seen is whether that massive effort, untested effort, and expensive effort actually will make a difference when it comes to particularly those blue wall states where Trump is trying to get ahead of Harris.
I mean, I guess if you really think about the numbers and what's changed, especially if you're looking at Gen Z voters, CNN on a good night, let's say, I don't know, maybe 1 million viewers. I mean, I'll give him two just because I'll give him 2 million. Theo Von's podcast, he's a top 5 podcaster. In the first 5 minutes, he has 10 times that or 5 times that in terms of the number of listeners. So whether those people, as you said, low propensity voters will actually vote, I don't know, but it's certainly getting at this enormous group of people that are not watching CNN or NBC or Fox for that matter.
Yeah, it's not even just the number. It's the voters themselves that are listening in and tuning into those. Those are the people that tend to be tuning out politics for the most part. And it's really enlightening to see what messages Trump and now Harris, she was on the Call Her Daddy podcast, which is largely targeted towards millennial, Gen Z women. The messages that they're giving to those younger voters, people who are tuned out of politics, really are enlightening of where they are trying to reach and who they're trying to reach. That something like a podcast like that for Harris, in many ways, is more valuable than her appearance on 60 Minutes.
Yeah, I mean, I think, Harris going on something like Call Her Daddy, which for those of you that don't know, is a sex podcast. I mean, and I've listened to some of the episodes. I mean, it's as like raunchy as it gets. I would die if I was sitting in the car with my mother or father listening to that. It brings into this idea of really reaching women and people who really care about reproductive rights and really pushing that message. And I think that brings into question sort of what happened in Georgia recently. Georgia's Supreme Court decision to reinstate the state's 6-week ban. Is this the kind of event that will remind Democrats or anyone for that matter who really cares about reproductive rights? Is that going to change? Is this the kind of event that will change things and get people out? I've sat in on focus groups and I have heard women say, I really care about reproductive rights, so I'm going to vote for Harris. But Trump's so much better on the economy. And I think there's a lot of women that are really struggling with this decision. So is Georgia's decision or Harris going on Call Her Daddy, is that going to sort of bring these people out for Harris?
Well, abortion for years now in races has been such a telling issue and such a huge issue, particularly for Harris. So even in years post-Dobbs, where there was thought that abortion wouldn't have the staying power as an issue, the issue of reproductive rights has continued to be such an impactful issue, especially in those states we're looking at. And my colleague Jasmine Wright, she always frames it this way. She's a Kamala Harris expert, has been covering her for years. And Harris's time as vice president is really the pre-Roe and the post-Roe era of so much of Harris's legacy as a vice president and where she shined was centered around the issue of abortion, particularly because Biden was not the greatest messenger on that issue, that Harris really led on that. So it's going to be a leading issue. And it's not just Georgia. I mean, Arizona, this is on the ballot. Nevada, it's on the ballot. Nebraska, which has its one vote in Omaha that will be central to the Harris campaign, that's on the ballot as well. Even down ballot, looking at Montana Senate, which is key for Democrats and where they're really trailing with John Tester, abortion is on the ballot in that state. So continue to see these abortion measures really playing an impactful role in getting out the vote for the presidential level as well.
Absolutely. I totally agree with you. I think it's going to be really fascinating. And I think it's going to end up sort of being a decision, if it's the economy that really matters, it's going to be a Trump win. And if it's sort of social and reproductive rights, it's going to be a Harris win.
And what I'm curious to see how those two issues differ as well for young men versus young women. Of Trump, going on Theo Von, Logan Paul, he's talking about the economy, he's talking about inflation and gas prices. That's the issue there. And for Harris, looking at Call Her Daddy, that's a message that's focused on women's rights. So the gender gap with Gen Z is extremely large when it comes to presidential level. So that's something I'm really looking for, is to see how those two messages resonate.
I think especially when you see that, if Gen Z or that age group of under 30 comes out to vote, when they get over, when Democrats get over 60% of that vote, they win. You look at Obama in 2008 and 2012, you look at Biden in 2020, that's when they win, when they're really able to mobilize that group under 30. And, I talk to my students and I say, like, how many of you watch CNN or watch Fox? And they don't even know how to find the channel. Like, it's not that they're ignoring it or choosing, they just don't even know how to find the channel. And they are getting their news through Call Her Daddy and Theo Vaughn, and TikTok clips or whatever it is. And so I think it'll be really interesting to see how these campaigns have figured out how to reach these young people.
Yeah, I think that'll be the real test to see of, if these young voters are getting a 60-second clip of a podcast and that's their news diet and that's impacting who they're supporting. It's really telling to see what message is resonating through with those voters.
Absolutely. Well, that wraps us up with the Decision Desk HQ's Let Me Finish for their episode. And don't forget, we will be back with you on Friday. And of course, we will be with you on November 5th on election night, right here, looking at all of the analysis of what's going on until every single vote is counted. I'm Liberty Vittert, professor of data science at Washington University in St. Louis. And with me is Katherine Swartz, a reporter at Notice. Thank you so much for watching, and we will see you back on Friday.